Hello, everybody. This is Rand Mendez from ISBM, and I'm here with Joanne Smith, our ISBM Practice Fellow expert on pricing. And the reason I have Joanne Smith here today is because we're getting a lot of input from our companies about the pricing challenges that they have faced and are facing in light of the Iran war. And I'm hearing a lot of challenges, and I wanted to talk to Joanne about this. Joanne, are you hearing challenges, and what type of challenges are you hearing about?
Well, first, Rand, good to be with you. And absolutely, I'm hearing challenges. We are seeing many companies already getting hit with higher cost, and they may even go higher. Now, I'm sure you know the big culprit here is the price of oil. Oil is now being restricted in its supply, predominantly through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil goes through there. And anybody that's been in business any length of time knows that if oil prices go up, it is likely or almost assuredly going to hit the supply chain such that we are almost all going to experience some level of cost or price um, increases. Now, they're
Yep.
likely to come, Rand, in really three ways. We see shipping cost, and that could be just fuel on a truck. It could be ocean freight that may need to take a longer route to avoid conflict areas, raising ocean freight as well. Ingredient cost, the obvious. And then for some manufacturing that is very energy intensive, they may see a meaningful cost change right in the cost of operation.
Okay. Well, given that, how are you, before we get into how to execute some of these challenges, how to handle these challenges that they're facing? Can you give us some insight into that?
Yeah, yeah. And really, the big challenge here, as you know, is the uncertainty. How high will that price of oil go, and how long will it go? So experts are all over the map on this, Rand. From it's
Mhm.
going to be short to it's probably going to be this summer, maybe late summer, to even a few that would say, oh, this is 1, 2 years, and it could go as high as $200 a barrel. So when I'm dealing with something that is likely temporary and it's highly uncertain, and in this case, also volatile, my go-to is typically surcharges. Just like we did in the very highly uncertain time that we had with tariffs a year ago, I'm going to typically go with the surcharges. Could be a fuel surcharge, a shipping surcharge, an ingredient surcharge. We may lump it into a more encompassing energy surcharge.
Okay. Well, they could also do a price increase. So what's the advantage of doing surcharge over price increases?
Yeah, great question. So the advantage on the surcharge is twofold, really. One, you can do it fast. Tomorrow, I can put out a letter informing my customers the following day, surcharges will be applied to all orders. I'm not negotiating, I'm implementing right away. And number two, most of our customers, if not every single one, understand the situation that's happening in the world and they understand the fairness of that action. Doesn't mean they're going to like it, doesn't mean they won't push back, but in their hearts, they understand that. Now, if you go to a straight price increase, now you're negotiating, which can take months, right? And if you have to, months just to put it in, and some contracts could be a year before it could even be implemented. So you've got
Mhm.
this slow time, and more importantly, it will feel unfair to your customers because the bulk of them recognize this is more likely to be temporary than permanent. So we don't want to go that way. Now, if you don't mind, I just do want to point out there are some downsides with surcharges that we need to think about. And the first one, of course, is when oil prices do come back down, and they will eventually, you have to give that back. You'll get push back from your customers, and it's only fair to give it back. Now, in the interim, you're going to have some customers play games where they're going to push you every time there's a small blip. Price goes up to 120, then suddenly drops to 105 in the dollar per barrel, and they're, oh, you got to give it back. Well, no, we do not want to overreact to those little swings, right? We may need to adjust a little higher, a little lower if it's a major swing, but we will eventually give it back. And maybe secondly, there's always a level of certain customers that will dispute the invoice or short pay it. So you do have a little bit of that hassle in your collection.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that's great. I know though that some of our member companies have some business units that are really not in a high growth market. In fact, some are in a down market. Um, how do you handle that quandary of the need to protect your margin to some degree versus you're already in a market that's declining or soft, and maybe you have some aggressive competitors? How do you handle that dynamic?
Yeah, that is really the great, great question, because the more we're in this kind of softer competitive markets, you run the risk of a volume loss, right? While you're looking to maybe pass surcharges. So first, let me just say that the bulk of my clients that I'm working with are not in down markets. They are either in tight markets or more imbalanced supply demand markets. But let's turn to the few that actually are in downturn loose markets. Now, I'm going to break this up, Rand, into two types of downturn.
Okay.
The difference here is going to be tied to when did you go through the transition from a more imbalanced to a loose market. So case one would be you're right in the middle of it. Pretty much last year you were in balance. You are now transitioning into a loose market. That's going to be the toughest, the riskiest. The other is when you've already, perhaps a year, 2 years, maybe even more, transitioned from balanced into this loose market. So let me first start with you're right in the middle of the transition. You're in that 6, maybe 9 month period from high to low. That's where even disciplined competitors, you're likely to find one or two that get silly aggressive. They're trying to buy share, if you will, in this lower demand market. Now, we see some unreasonable behaviors when this is shaking out. And you'll see some of your customers that are quite price sensitive, they might be willing to jump to somebody else for a couple pennies, for 1 or 2%. So during that period of time, it is absolutely risky or riskier to then add in surcharges here. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. What I am saying is I would have to do a deeper analysis on market and competitive dynamics, price volume trade-offs, things like that, to determine whether the risk and reward were correct. So it's not a given on that situation. Now, more companies that are in downturns are actually already through the transition, and they're kind of in a steady state, lower loose market where the really doggy dog time is already shaken out. Customers that were likely to jump ship for a few pennies, a few percent, have done so. The ones that remain with you are just tied to your value, your relationship, your customer experience, and less likely to leave. And now you and your competitors are making less money because it's a slower market. And you probably hurt your margin percent as you fought for share on the way down. So now you're all at this steady state where you can't afford to get even worse. So you are all of you likely to want to cover any additional cost coming your way. Competitors might lead you. They might be there before you. They might follow you. In this case, I'm going to say 99% of the time, I am likely to put those surcharges through, I'm likely to do it in a very transparent way. I might make a public announcement. For sure, I am writing in a letter to all my customers what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. Because I want them to experience the fact this is a necessity, it is fair, and we are equally applying it.
Okay. Wow. But a lot of that's actually reassuring, Joanne. I think that's great advice. I'm going to be getting this word out to our member companies. I think you can probably help some of them in different ways. I'll let you know, but we really appreciate your insights. It's a challenge, but with a lot of good thought and expertise as you've laid out here, I think we're going to get through this period. And I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Rand. It's my pleasure.